We're following breaking news in the Trayvon Martin case. NBC News has learned that George Zimmerman will face charges to be announced by the special prosecutor within the next few hours. Joining us now is former U.S. Attorney Kendall Coffey in Miami, in Sanford, Florida, my colleague Joyanne Reed, and here in New York, Attorney Jamie Floyd. Kendall, if I can begin with you, unless the state attorney has uncovered a great deal more evidence than we've certainly heard so far, how difficult is the decision that faces this state attorney?
It's a very difficult decision because while we keep hearing about probable cause for an arrest, she knows that she's looking at a lot more than that. She's got to have a case that she can prove beyond a reasonable doubt. And at the same time, there's an unusual obstacle that Florida has built into the stand your ground law. There's actually the ability of a defendant to get a judicial determination of immunity, basically shutting down the whole prosecution if a defendant can establish that they were properly standing their ground by a preponderance of the evidence. So this is not an easy case. Frankly, I think her investigation, from what I can tell, has been conducted with a high level of professionalism, and whatever else comes of this matter going forward, this is a gutsy decision if indeed she's going to be bringing charges against George Zimmerman.
Indeed, Jamie, in cases like this, the tradition is often to charge high and then kind of go through things as they shake down, as it were, in the process of judicial proceedings. What do you think of her decision to do this? Because having dispensed with the possibility of a grand jury murder once out, we're now, I'm assuming, facing the possibility of a manslaughter.
Yeah, generally you do charge high, hoping that you'll have either a plea bargain or some sort of compromise verdict. I'm not sure that's the wise way to go here. First of all, you've had extraordinary publicity, and we have now a defendant that's exhibited a rather different way of going about things, at least in the 44 days that we've had thus far. And this is a very different sort of prosecutor, a no-nonsense person, and as was well put just now, a rather extraordinary set of facts, a limited set of facts, unless she's got more information than we have. And I certainly hope she does, because one would hope the prosecutor's office has more information than the media. But if there are no witnesses, no specific witnesses to the actual events between Trayvon Martin
well, there are some individuals who have given interviews claiming to be witnesses to those events.
But these are people who heard things, and we're talking, and perhaps one young boy who may have seen something. But I'm talking about the instant in time where that gun went off. That is the stand your ground moment, because there's a possibility of pursuit. There's a possibility, you know, if George Zimmerman pursues the boy, does the stand your ground law fall away? Does he lose his right to immunity? And that's a real question that may not have even been litigated in Florida. So there are all kinds of possibilities that we have not yet begun to consider. As was said earlier in the hour, Martin, the case begins today. It did not, the legal case, the legal proceeding begins today. And so we have to all take a deep breath and begin to consider all of the possibilities.
Joyanne, in the last 24 hours, you and I have seen George Zimmerman's attorneys stand down from the case, saying they hadn't heard from him, suggesting he's not in Florida, saying they're indeed concerned about his mental state, some suggestion that he may be suffering some form of PTSD. Why would they be saying that? Is there a legal motive, do you think, in why they were saying that?
Well, I mean, Martin, obviously the whole press conference yesterday was inexplicable. It was something unlike anything I have ever seen. And also protecting themselves a little bit. I mean, here are two people who have said and represented to the public, and I'm assuming to the prosecutor, that if charges were filed, they could produce George Zimmerman, someone they've never seen in person, but they were with a high degree of confidence saying that they could get him to turn himself in if charges were filed. But now they're saying that they haven't spoken to him since before last Sunday and can't get him to return their calls. So I think that there's a point at which the attorneys are also trying to protect themselves in the sense that they are the ones who have lost control of this person.
Kendall Coffey, I want to put the same question to you, sir. I mean, what do you think of what happened yesterday, where these lawyers who were announcing that they were standing down at the same time were suggesting that this man is suffering some kind of psychiatric injury as a result of what happened?
It was an extremely unfortunate press conference from the standpoint of lawyers and George Zimmerman, certainly to describe their reasons for withdrawing. They got a right to walk away from the case if they can't communicate with their client, but to describe their reasons in a sense that indicates that their client is behaving erratically, is desperate, is hiding, is out of state. state is all negative for George Zimmerman, and it's more consistent, frankly, with evidence of guilt than innocence. On the other hand, my sense is they began that press conference thinking they'd keep it short and sweet. That cases like this take on a life of their own. I think the press conference and the questions that they weren't ready for led them to make comments that, frankly, they hadn't scripted. Unfortunate press conference, but it's just pointed out, that's old news very, very quickly, because if charges are filed, then what's going to be decided and what's going to be considered will have nothing to do with whatever those attorneys said yesterday during the press conference.
Former U.S. State Attorney Kendall Coffey, Joanne Reed and Jamie Floyd, thank you all for joining us.